Never stray from the path, never eat a windfall apple, and never trust a man whose eyebrows meet in the middle, is the most memorable quote from the 1984 gothic fantasy horror film, The Company of Wolves. Directed by Neil Jordan and based on a short story by Angela Carter, the film tells the story of female adolescence through the lens of a fairy tale about Little Red Riding Hood. I think it's fair to say that in recent years, many people have rediscovered hidden fairy tale film gems that hold much deeper meaning and themes than might appear at first. But after watching The Company of Wolves, I still couldn't believe that a film from the 80s could address the topics of sexual awakening, puberty, and girlhood in such a delicate and hauntingly beautiful way. Hi everyone! You're watching Femme Fatale's Heels channel, where we talk about women, film, and women in film. And in this video, I'd like to explore the haunting beauty of The Company of Wolves and how it uses a fairy tale narrative to talk about desire, sensuality, and the wild nature of young women. The whole narrative is built like a literal fever dream. A young girl, Rosaleen, played by Sarah Patterson, is sleeping in her room with red lipstick on her lips. As her sister mentions at the beginning of the film, Rosaleen's tummy hurts, which might at first seem like an innocent detail, but looking closer and considering what follows, it can be assumed that Rosaleen is experiencing her first period cramps. The red lipstick doesn't belong to Rosaleen. She secretly took it from her sister. As is often portrayed in mass culture, makeup, especially red lips, is a symbol of adult womanhood, not childhood. I remember when I was about 14 and bought myself a cheap red lipstick, and how my mother gently warned me, red lips are a statement. Through this subtle but powerful detail, Neil Jordan gradually draws the viewer into a story about a girl's coming of age.
The Company of Wolves is about a young girl reaching puberty. Really, it's about the beginning of a woman's sexual life. The redness of the cloak, the redness of the hood, the redness of the girl's garment is common to all the traditional variations of Red Riding Hood. In all these stories, there's a young girl who goes into the forest and who meets an animal. Well, I mean, animals usually are something to do with the animal instincts, as we call them. The animals, the wolves that she meets, stand in some way for sexuality. I think they probably stand for the girl's own sexuality rather than rough, hairy male sexuality.
In Rosaleen's dream, her sister dies. Running through the forest in a long white dress, she stumbles across old toys that now appear as monstrous, haunting decorations. Rats scurry out of a pink dollhouse, and a plush teddy bear tries to strangle the girl. But it is ultimately a pack of wolves that surrounds her in a post-mortem whirlwind of fur and fangs, sealing her fate. After the funeral, Rosaleen's grandmother calls her sister a poor little lamb and says there was no one who could have saved her. When Rosaleen asks,
"Why couldn't she save herself?"
the grandmother replies that Rosaleen is still a child and doesn't understand many things. But I find this line of dialogue particularly interesting. On one hand, it suggests that due to her youth and naivety, Rosaleen doesn't yet grasp the dangers of the world. On the other, it hints at something more powerful. Rosaleen doesn't view herself or other women as helpless victims in a male-dominated world. While Rosaleen's parents mourn the death of their daughter, she stays at her grandmother's house, and that's where the story truly begins. As she knits a red cloak, the grandmother begins telling Rosaleen stories about men whose eyebrows meet in the middle. Although the word werewolf is only mentioned once in the film, it's clear that the nature of these men is dark, twisted, and animalistic. Instead, they're often described as being hairy on the inside, a metaphor for their predatory instincts. As author Angela Carter noted in an interview, the grandmother's motivations are more complex than they first appear.
In the context of the movie, it's the grandmother who's telling the story to Rosaleen to turn her against the wolves, and we know what that means. So we know what that means. She's warning her against men and against marriage. And the aggressiveness of the wars in that sequence is Granny's strategy to keep the child for herself.
Rather than encouraging independence or self-discovery, the grandmother uses fear to maintain closeness. This reflects a cycle often seen in mother-daughter or grandmother-granddaughter relationships within patriarchal structures, where older women, having endured their own traumas and restrictions, unconsciously pass down fear, suspicion, and control to the next generation. If this resonates with you and you'd like to see more videos like this, give it a like and consider subscribing. It really helps me keep going. Just like in a short story, The Grandmother's First Tale is about a woman who marries a man who turns out to be hairy on the inside. On their wedding night, he steps outside to relieve himself and never comes back. Years later, the woman finds a new husband, and together they have a few children. But the film doesn't portray this experience of motherhood as idyllic or carefree. Struggling with housework, a baby in her arms, and 2 more children at the table, the woman looks weary and worn down. The rebellious spark in her eyes has long since vanished, along with her first husband. But then, unexpectedly, the vanished man returns. With glowing yellow eyes that pierce through the dark, he accuses her of infidelity. What follows is a chilling transformation, especially well executed for the 1980s, as the man turns into a full-blown beast. No longer human, he lunges at her. At the last moment, her current husband comes to the rescue. The wolf is slain, and its severed head transforms back into the face of a man. At the end of the story, Rosaleen says,
I'd never let a man strike me.
the story ultimately serves as a dark cautionary tale, warning young women about the cyclical nature of violence, not just within romantic relationships, but within the family itself. The grandmother's eerie tale hides a deeper truth. The real danger isn't always mythical beasts, but the men who demand loyalty, obedience, and sacrifice, only to punish women for daring to live their own lives. In this context, being hairy on the inside becomes a metaphor for hidden violence and suppressed male rage that can erupt even after years of absence. The man's return isn't about rekindled love. It's about punishment and control. But the film doesn't suggest that all men are inherently dangerous. When Rosaleen returns home and sleeps in her own bed, she hears her parents having sex. The next morning, she asks,
Does he hurt you?
Does who hurt me?
Does Daddy hurt you? When
No, not at all.
sounds like
Like what?
the beast Granny talked about.
This question highlights Rosaleen's still childlike worldview, now clashing with the confusing onset of adolescence. It's a common story. Young children who accidentally witness their parents in an intimate moment often assume they were fighting or hurting each other. Rosaleen's question about pain is no exception.
And if there's a beast in men, it meets its match in women too.
With this moment, the film subtly introduces the idea that a man and a woman can exist in a relationship built on equality. That, unlike the first tale, a woman doesn't necessarily have to lose her freedom or wildness to be loved. She can find a partner who is her equal. Though, of course, wolves are far more common than princes. In parallel, Rosaleen also has a developing storyline with a local boy who clearly has feelings for her and tries to show affection, but she, at best, feels lukewarm about his advances. Another of the grandmother's tales leans more into religious superstition and old folk beliefs.
They say the priest's bastards often turn into wolves as they grow older. If the child is born on Christmas Day, if he's born feet first, he'll be the one. If he's born feet first and his eyebrows meet in the middle. Oh yes, very bad.
Since it's one of the shortest stories in the film, there isn't much dialogue or context, but its visual and symbolic power still resonates. In this scene, a young boy rubs an ointment into his chest and transforms into a wolf. The act is quiet, almost ritualistic. He willingly undergoes the transformation. While the film doesn't explain the meaning outright, this moment can be seen as a metaphor for puberty, forbidden desire, or even sin. The ointment might symbolize a kind of inherited or secret knowledge, something passed down or discovered that allows the boy to access his animal side. In folklore, such transformations were often linked to pacts with the devil or to repressed urges breaking through. Here, it could suggest the idea that becoming a wolf, giving in to darker, more instinctual urges, is not only inevitable, but also something that boys are taught or conditioned into. Still, I'm not fully sure about this interpretation, so I would love to hear your thoughts on the meaning of this story. When Rosaleen goes for a walk in the forest with the local boy, he kisses her, and she immediately runs away. Her disappearance sparks panic in the village, as her parents fear she was attacked by a wolf. While the men go off hunting the beast, Rosaleen tells her mother a new fairy tale. As I understand it, this story is actually just a retelling of one of her grandmother's earlier tales, since only at the end of the film does Rosaleen truly become a storyteller in her own right. In Angela Carter's original text, this tale takes up only a few sentences, but in the film, it becomes one of the central narratives. In this story, a witch falls in love with a man of higher social standing. When she becomes pregnant, he abandons her and marries a woman of his own kind. The witch then crashes the wedding feast and transforms all the wealthy guests into wolves. This tale adds another layer of complexity to the film's themes. Until now, all the men who turned into wolves were already werewolves by nature. But here, it is the woman, the witch, who actively transforms her former lover into a beast. This shift is important because it shows that monstrousness isn't always something inherent. Sometimes it's a punishment, a curse, a reflection of betrayal. The witch's transformation of the man into a wolf becomes a poetic act of vengeance, a symbolic rewriting of power dynamics in which the woman reclaims control over the narrative. In her pain, she literally turns the upper class into beasts, exposing the wolf beneath their refined exteriors. Arguably, the central part of the film is the third fairy tale, the one in which Rosaleen goes to her grandmother's house and meets a wolf, or rather a man whose eyebrows meet in the middle. Well-spoken and dressed in refined clothing, he flirts with Rosaleen, and despite all her grandmother's warnings, she lets herself be charmed. This scene presents a striking contrast. The local boys Rosaleen's age are awkward and immature, while older men appear smooth, romantic, and mysterious. Even though the film uses the stylization of a fairy tale, it accurately portrays the way young girls can mistake experience and danger for romance and sophistication. After placing a bet on who will reach the grandmother's house first, the man arrives before Rosaleen and devours the old woman. When Rosaleen finally gets there, the audience is treated to a reimagining of the classic Little Red Riding Hood exchange. Only here, the interaction is soaked in erotic tension and flirtation on the edge of danger.
My, what big arms do you have?
All the better to hug you with.
In Angela Carter's original story, the wolf encourages the girl to remove her clothes, tempting her to join him in bed. But unlike the traditional fairy tale, this Red Riding Hood is not afraid of the wolf. She flirts back. The girl burst out laughing. She knew she was nobody's meat, as Carter writes. Although these events in the film are more censored, Rosaleen doesn't fully undress, and the wolf still represents a clear threat. The scene is a veiled metaphor for her sexual awakening. Unlike in Angela Carter's original story, where the girl appears confident and unafraid, this version of Rosaleen is more hesitant and visibly frightened. Her fear reminds us that she is still on the threshold between girlhood and womanhood. And while curiosity draws her in, the danger is real. The wolf isn't just a symbol of seduction, but also of the violence and unpredictability that can come with entering the adult world as a young woman. This moment encapsulates the central theme of The Company of Wolves, the tension between desire and fear, innocence and experience, safety and freedom. It shows that the path to adulthood, especially for girls, is often lined with danger disguised as charm and threats masked by tenderness. Carter's story ends with a quote, "Sweet and sound she sleeps in Granny's bed, between the paws of the tender wolf." But instead of calm, in the film, Rosaleen wakes up in a state of horror and shock. She screams as the wolves break through the glass. The ending in Carter's story feels more emancipatory and feminist to me, because it clearly shows a young girl confronting her wild nature and desires, and ultimately finding harmony with them. While the film's finale also evokes the terror of adolescence when hormones and confusing desires overwhelm you completely, it captures that intense, often chaotic moment of growing up when the world suddenly feels both thrilling and frightening, and the boundaries between self-control and surrender blur.
I suppose the scream is a bit like the end. Really is a bit like a kind of an orgasmic thing, all these wolves running and running and running to meet her. And I mean, my feeling of her scream really is that it's both joy and terror at the same time.
Rather than presenting Rosaleen's transformation as something purely sinister or tragic, the film embraces the complexity of coming of age, the struggle, the fear, but also the empowerment that comes from accepting oneself fully, including the darker, untamed parts. But before this ending, the film features one more fairy tale, this time told by Rosaleen herself to the wolf. It's a story about a young she-wolf girl. His tale is significant because it marks a shift in Rosaleen's role, from a passive listener of stories passed down by her grandmother to an active storyteller, reclaiming her voice and agency. The image of the she-wolf symbolizes feminine strength, wildness, and independence, embracing the instinctual and untamed aspects of womanhood. By telling this story to the wolf, Rosaleen is not only confronting her fears, but also asserting control over the narrative of her own life. This act reflects her journey towards self-empowerment, where she no longer sees herself as prey or victim, but as a powerful being capable of defining her own identity and destiny. The she-wolf is a metaphor for breaking free from societal constraints and embracing one's true nature, even if that nature is fierce, wild, and outside traditional norms. In this way, the tale encapsulates the film's deeper themes of transformation, autonomy, and the reclaiming of feminine power.
Rosaleen, the heroine of the story, should have a story to herself, that she should tell something that she had made up herself and that actually refers to what she has learned from everything she's gone through. And even up to the point at which we started shooting, we weren't sure where this story should be.
Wounded and alone, the she-wolf wanders through the night forest until a priest, instead of showing fear or hatred, offers her kindness. In this quiet, poetic tale, the girl wolf disappears into a well, fading into the water, like a memory or a myth. The story then returns us to Rosaleen and the wolf in the grandmother's cottage, hunters close in, ready to kill. But in the final moment, Rosaleen's mother sees something in the wolf's glowing yellow eyes, something unmistakable. Her daughter. And instead of striking, she chooses to save her. This act of recognition is quietly revolutionary. Rather than rejecting her daughter's transformation, her desire, wildness, and newfound identity, the mother embraces it. In doing so, she breaks the cycle of fear and repression passed down through generations. It's a rare moment of maternal solidarity, and it reinforces the film's deeper feminist message that coming of age doesn't have to mean submission or shame, that women can witness each other's change and choose to love rather than fear what they see. For me, The Company of Wolves is ultimately about embracing your wildness, facing your fears head on and discovering the strength that comes from owning who you really are. This film stays with you, a reminder that growing up isn't just about losing innocence, but about gaining the power to shape your own story. And I'm truly happy that such stories exist and would love to see more of them. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the company of wolves, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more video essays on feminist horror, fairy tales, and everything in between. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What did the company of wolves mean to you? Until next time, stay wild, stay curious, and take care.